Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and this is a cheeky bonus video because I was realising that I have read a heap of very good books lately and I had no idea when I was going to review them. So I thought I would try and get some extra good book review content out for you should you be wanting a bit of detail about some of the books I've been reading lately. I don't know how many of these there are going to be, but there's some bonus content headed your way. So today I am quite obviously going to be talking about one of the summer's hottest releases, the Jasmine Throne. Hop in, grab a cup of tea, let's talk about it. But while you're grabbing that cup of tea, some disclaimers before we start. I was sent a free review copy of this book from the publisher, who are very kind to me. Regardless, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm also going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. I'm going to be talking about some elements of the book that one might consider a spoiler in some senses. So if you don't want to know anything about this book, pause this video, go away and read it, come back, and then tell me your thoughts. This is the start of a new epic fantasy trilogy that's called The Burning Kingdoms. It came out in the UK in June 2021. I'm hoping that this video is also going up in June 2021, but I'm honestly not sure. Don't know much about the sequel. I think we have a title. I can't remember. Let me check the back of the book because that is where that will be. The sequel I don't have much, if any, information about, but it will probably come out next year. The author Tasha Suri has previously written Empire of Sand and Realm of Ash. I have read Empire of Sand, but much like Sand Through an Hourglass, it has fallen out of my memory. I do want to reread them though, especially having read this. They've been on my list to get to for a while. Those are the Books of Amber duology. Just to tell you about some of Tasha Suri's accomplishments, she's won the Best Newcomer Award from the British Fantasy Society and has been nominated for the Astounding Award and Locus Award for Best First Novel. And according to her website, which I will link for information, she is currently based in London. Trying to check if the press release had any other interesting... To no one's surprise, she owns a cat. There you go. This book follows a captive princess and a servant who has forbidden magic as they meet and become unlikely allies in their mission to take down a tyrant king. It's inspired in part by the history of India, and before you ask, yes, it is indeed Sapphic. This is an incredibly cool setting for a book and setting for a story, and I mean both in the sense of the overall world, but specific details about the setting are very cool. I'm very specifically talking about the temple in which Malini, our captive princess, is being held captive. The Hirana is an ancient temple that was once the source of powerful magic but is now little more than a decaying ruin, and it is a very cool semi-magical, semi-sentient place, which is one of my absolute favourite tropes. Like, I love the land having agency within a story. I really enjoy that. Priya, our servant, has magic that is connected to the Hirana, and it's really interesting the ways in which that manifests. Essentially, more sentient structures, please, and thank you, in my fantasy. I like it a lot. When I first set out to read this, I thought it was going to be a strict dual point of view. We switch between every chapter. It's Malini 1 second and Priya the next. But actually, I was pleasantly surprised to discover that while they do have point of view chapters, there are a lot more points of view than I was initially expecting. Because while the we are two women from different worlds and yet we must fight together in alternating chapters is a tried and tested method for structuring a book, I think in a story with as much politics as this one has, it would have made things very confusing to only have their input, whereas you get different bits of information from all different kinds of sides of the conflict, which is very interesting and makes for a much more nuanced view of everything that's happening. And a story that might otherwise be read as very binary, this is good, this is evil, and therefore good must triumph over evil, it reads more as we have a situation that needs to be sorted out in the best way possible with the resources that are available to us. It's where you can't necessarily justify all of the actions that are happening. Some people do some very bad things. You can at least understand why they are happening for the most part, and I think that makes for a really well-rounded story for me. This book is a sapphic fantasy. It's being marketed as such, and don't get it twisted, it definitely is. There is a romance there, but if you're expecting this to be a sapphic romance, I don't think it's the same thing. It is a story that has a romance plotline in it, but it's very slow burn. It's much more a, oh, how interesting, alongside this alliance that we have had to form, I'm attracted to you. I don't know how I feel about that and how that might complicate things. That's more what the vibe is, and I personally really appreciated it. I think had I been in the mood for a very romantic book, I might have felt a little bit not cheated, just a little bit disappointed by this one, but knowing what I was going in for, I had a good time. I will be really intrigued by how the romance plays out in the second book, and whether it's going to be punched up a notch or if it stays kind of this quite level-headed at the moment feeling. One thing that does spring to mind when I think about that aspect of the book, and I think Angela brought it up in our kind of buddy reading channel, is that this is a world where in this place, casual queerness was once a thing. Women could be in relationships with women, men could be in relationships with men, and they aren't allowed to anymore. And it puts a really interesting dynamic on this relationship and on, in living memory, this was fine and it has become not fine. Or maybe not living memory, but in our oral history, we know that this was at one point a thing that was okay. It makes for a cool dynamic. This is a slow burn, I mentioned it. It's a slow burn romance and it's a slow burn book in general. I think if you've already read Empire of Sand and Realm of Ash, you'll be familiar with the kind of pace that Tasha Suri writes at, and it's not bam, bam, everything's happening at once. You don't know where you're going. Big plot twisty, big reveal at the right moment. And yeah, it's not like that. It's a much slower story. That's not to say that exciting things don't happen, because they do. And it definitely picks up towards the end. But I think you have to go in with the expectation of a slightly slower book. And I think you'll still have a good time. Like, go in with the intention of that. Go in ready to soak up the setting and really feel the emotions and just have a good time. Have a great time. One of the books I thought of as a comparison is another Sapphic fantasy, and it's also orange. I think I'm just drawing orange connections here. Pride of the Orange Tree, this heckin' big boy. Sapphic fantasy, dragons, it's great. I need to reread it and I have not had the courage or the conviction. If you wanted a much more intentionally romantic, in this case, MLM story, Winter's Orbit is great. This isn't what the cover actually looks like, but this is my review copy cover. It's fantastic, just, ugh. That will give you all of the romantic, tropey romantic vibes. And lastly, another new release-ish from this year, The Unbroken. I thought it would be silly not to mention this. Again, a very different book, but also has a kind of semi-in-the-background Sapphic story going on. Yes, yes. If I remember, I will link the Space Sirens book club where we talked about The Unbroken, because I think it's a good time. So yeah, I had a fantastic time with this book. I wasn't sure what to expect going in. As I say, I couldn't remember much of her previous books, so I was going in thinking, oh, is this going to stick with me? But actually I found that the story was much easier to hold on to, and I found that meant that I enjoyed the book much more. And if that's the trajectory of Tasha Suri's writing in terms of my experience of it, I'm excited about it, because she's just going to keep getting better and better. Have you read this? Do you have plans to? Do you have any other Sapphic fantasy recommendations? You want to plonk them in the comments below? I'd always appreciate it. Type all those things. Tell me all of them. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. Come hang out on Discord. We have a good time. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. I realised I set up my camera really badly for this video because I need to put this book behind me, but it's gonna be very much facing the wrong way. Oh, it'll be okay. My books are very dusty and I'm throwing my phone on the floor.